That night, the blizzard was a living, howling thing, swallowing the faint glow of Buzz's remote cabin. He saw the crimson trail in the snow, a stark, shocking line of red against the white. It led from the shadows of the pine trees to a small, shivering bundle, no bigger than a coffee mug, huddled against his porch steps. Buzz, a man whose sleep was shredded by the ghosts of combat and the fresh agony of losing his wife, knew death when he saw it. This creature was barely holding on. Its tiny body was brittle with the -20-degree cold, its fur black and strangely tinged with a deep, earthy red. Buzz, the former Army medic, immediately went into action. He scooped it up, the military training taking over, a single-minded focus that finally silenced the screaming fear in his mind. He carried it inside, gently tucked against the warmth of his flannel shirt. For the first time in years, Buzz wasn't calculating threats or replaying trauma. He was fighting for a fragile, innocent life. He worked by the light of his wood stove, warming towels, meticulously rubbing circulation back into the tiny, oversized paws. He named the pup Phoenix, a nod to its red-tinged fur and the desperate, impossible hope that it might rise from the ashes of that storm. He maintained a watch schedule more precise than any military operation. Drop by drop, life flowed back into the small body through a makeshift dropper. When Phoenix finally stirred, letting out a weak, desperate whimper, Buzz felt a foreign warmth spread through his chest. It was a purpose he thought he'd lost forever. He drove 2 hours through the treacherous snow to see Dr. Mary Beth Anderson, a third-generation veterinarian. She confirmed it was a wolf hybrid, maybe a little over 2 weeks old. But she looked at the pup's unusual coloring and its immense paws, and her eyes held a deeper, professional concern she didn't voice. Buzz paid her fee, feeling a lightness he hadn't known in years. He was responsible for this life. The little pup was a miracle of resilience. But miracles often come with a price. Phoenix was growing too fast, and the battle to save the wolf had just begun. The greater fight, the one for Buzz's own soul, was quickly coming to a terrifying head. Phoenix thrived. It grew with impossible speed, its movements fluid and graceful, like liquid shadow across the cabin floor. But the true danger wasn't its size. It was the wildness that slept just beneath the surface. Buzz's nightmares hadn't vanished. They were just waiting for the perfect moment. One night, a phantom sound, perhaps a car backfiring in a distant memory, perhaps a slammed door of the past, jolted Buzz awake in a cold sweat. He thrashed in the darkness, accidentally shoving Phoenix, who had been curled protectively against his chest, sensing his distress. The wolf pup, startled, hurt, and confused, reacted on pure, primal instinct. There was a sudden, sharp snap, and the searing, cold pain of teeth clamped onto Buzz's forearm. For a frozen second, Buzz stared at the dark eyes of the creature he had risked everything to save. In that moment of panic, he saw only the untamed beast, the wild animal that law and society warned him about. He felt the cold shock of betrayal. This is what they warned you about, Frank. This is what happens when you trust the wild. This is prejudice justified. But then Phoenix did the impossible. The grip instantly loosened. The wolf whimpered, a low, sorrowful sound that was clearly regret. It nudged Buzz's arm, then began to softly lick the wound, its large amber eyes wide with a profound, almost human remorse. The gesture wasn't instinct, it was choice, the conscious decision to favor its human companion over its wild nature. Buzz understood. The wild thing had chosen nurture over nature. He had accidentally hurt the wolf. And the wolf, though hurt, had immediately chosen him over the wild. That moment, that painful bite and the immediate act of atonement sealed their bond. Buzz realized his own trauma, his own prejudice against the world was fading because of this creature. He saw the world and himself, not through the lens of fear, but through the lens of compassion. That wolf, the one who carried the law of the wild in its blood, was the only thing capable of silencing the war that raged inside the old soldier. Phoenix's small, warm weight against his chest chased the ghosts away like smoke. The danger wasn't inside the cabin. It was outside. And the next threat would not be an instinctual reaction, but a planned, calculated attack, forcing Buzz to choose between his personal sanctuary and the wolf's very existence. Phoenix was now the size of a full-grown German shepherd, yet he was barely 4 months old. His coat, a thick, lustrous black, occasionally showed deep, vibrant streaks of red in the sunlight. His howl was a mournful, powerful song that spoke of wild freedom, not a dog's bark. The whispers had started. Wally Jensen, Buzz's old partner from the park ranger days, stopped by. He just shook his head and warned Buzz, "Frank, whatever that is, people are talking. This isn't a dog. This is something the law, and maybe the hunters, will want." Then came the first catastrophic reveal of Phoenix's true nature. Buzz was stacking wood when he heard a sudden, furious snarl. Emerging from the forest, drawn by the scent of a recent deer kill, was a massive mountain lion, a predator built for silent, lethal violence. Buzz was 20 feet from his rifle. He was helpless. But he wasn't alone. Phoenix didn't hesitate. The wolf put himself between Buzz and the lion. The sound that came from Phoenix's throat wasn't a snarl. It was a defiant, primal roar. The mountain lion, easily 3 times Phoenix's weight, paused. It sensed something unusual. Not prey, but a challenging predator. The tense standoff felt like an hour until the lion finally broke, melting back into the trees. That night, Buzz finally accepted the impossible truth. He typed the characteristics into his old laptop. The size, the coloring, the growth rate, the roar. Every search led to the same name, the red wolf, Canis rufus, critically endangered, legally the rarest, most regulated, and most prejudiced against canine in North America. Dr. Mary Beth Anderson confirmed it with trembling hands. "Frank, you didn't save a puppy. You saved a legend. And now the entire conservation department and every hunter looking for a trophy knows where it is." The doctor, a woman of deep ethical commitment, was forced to report her discovery. Buzz was crushed. He had protected a wild animal, a beautiful species, only to place himself and Phoenix in the crosshairs of the law. But the threat was deeper than the law. Phoenix, restless one morning, was violently shaking his collar off. Buzz noticed the tag was loose. He picked it up. It wasn't a standard veterinary tag. It was a highly sophisticated, military-grade GPS tracker. Someone was not just monitoring the red wolf. They were hunting it. Someone had wanted Phoenix to be found, but perhaps not saved. The legal trouble was just a front. The true threat was cold-blooded greed and the prejudice of those who saw the species as nothing more than a bounty. The red wolf was a target. Buzz looked at Phoenix. His fight was no longer about saving his own life. It was about protecting this rare, precious life from the relentless judgment of the outside world. He realized the prejudice against Phoenix, simply because of what he was the same fear and misunderstanding that had driven Buzz into isolation. The hunters weren't the only ones searching. Days later, Phoenix brought Buzz a small, chewed-up piece of fabric, part of a worn bandana. It wasn't the pups. It was the faint scent of a mother mule deer, one Buzz had feared Phoenix had killed. The mother was alive. Phoenix wasn't just a killer, he was a protector. He only hunted what was necessary for survival, not sport. He knew the difference between subsistence and slaughter. This small act of nobility fueled Buzz's resolve to defy the law. Buzz was fighting alone against the system and against unseen hunters. But an impossible choice was coming. The wild would call its own, and Buzz had to watch as his salvation decided whether to embrace the laws of the wild or the loyalty of a broken man. The Fish and Wildlife Officer, Richard Brennan, was closing in. Buzz knew the time was short. He sat on his porch, dread tightening his chest. Then the wilderness issued its ultimate summons. On a full moon night over the Tetons, a pack of wild red wolves appeared at the edge of the property. They were magnificent, ghosts of the forest, untamed, their howls a conversation only Phoenix could understand. Phoenix stood rigid, every muscle trembling with primal urge, listening to the call of his blood. The pack alpha howled, a clear, compelling invitation for the lost pup to join his rightful family. A chance for Phoenix to fulfill his biological destiny and ensure the survival of his critically endangered species. Buzz's heart shattered. He knew he had no right to hold the wolf back. Phoenix belonged to the wild, to the law of nature, to the continuation of his species. Buzz felt the crushing weight of selfishness. If he kept Phoenix, the wolf would be safe, but perhaps his species would die out. He walked to the door, his hands shaking, and slowly opened it. He whispered, the words ragged with grief, "Go, boy, go home. Be what you are." Phoenix walked out, slowly, deliberately. He met his own kind. The wild pack circled him, sniffing, acknowledging him, welcoming him into the ancient fold. For 10 agonizing minutes, Phoenix stood among the wolves, a free spirit finally among its equals, the future of his species hanging in the balance. Buzz stood frozen in the doorway, offering no resistance, preparing for the inevitable loss of the one thing that had pulled him back from the abyss. And then, the moment that defied all known science, all instinct, and all law. Phoenix turned. He walked away from the pack. He walked away from the freedom of the wilderness, the safety of his species, the pull of his own blood. He walked straight back to Buzz's porch, sat down and leaned his massive head gently against the old man's knee. He had made his choice. Loyalty over law, love over instinct. He had chosen the broken human over the completeness of the pack. Buzz sank to his knees, burying his face in Phoenix's thick fur, the tears finally coming. Tears not of grief, but of profound, impossible gratitude. You chose me. You chose the one they told you to fear. This was no longer a rescue mission. It was a partnership. The choice was made, but the war wasn't over. The law and the men carrying the guns were on their way. The final explosive confrontation would require a miracle, a legal maneuver, and a fight against a force even mightier than the law. The confrontation came on a bright, cold morning. 2 heavy-duty trucks from Fish and Wildlife, a sheriff's cruiser, and a large veterinary transport van arrived. Officer Richard Brennan, a veteran of wildlife enforcement, approached with the cold authority of the law, his tranquilizer gun visible. "Mr. Cooper," Brennan stated, his voice professional and impersonal, "the law is absolute. This is a critically endangered species. It must be relocated for the protection of the animal and the public." Buzz stood firm, flanked by his old friend Wally Jensen and an influential local retired federal judge. Buzz's defense wasn't legal jargon. It was his raw, personal testimony. "Phoenix saved me." The two sides were deadlocked. Brennan represented the systemic prejudice, the idea that something wild and different must be removed to maintain order. Buzz represented the individual truth, that love and loyalty transcend species and law. The judge was arguing a loophole, a rarely used precedent for therapeutic animals. Then the true nature of the Wyoming wilderness intervened with violent finality. A scream from the perimeter, a massive, agitated grizzly bear, foam around its muzzle, lumbered out of the woods. It saw the group of humans as a threat, or worse, prey. The officers fumbled for their weapons. The bear was too close, too fast. Panic seized the group. Phoenix moved like black lightning. He launched himself, not at the bear, but between the grizzly and the humans. He was drastically outsized, drastically outmatched, but he stood his ground. The sound that ripped from his throat was a terrifying, undeniable challenge, a promise of violence that made the grizzly freeze. Phoenix was saying, "This is my territory. These are my people. You will not pass." The confrontation was brief but stunning. The grizzly, sensing the unwavering, life-or-death commitment of the red wolf, turned and retreated back into the forest. Silence. Phoenix simply walked back to Buzz's side, tail wagging once, his amber eyes calm, as if he'd just performed a simple parlor trick. He had just saved the life of every man who was there to take him away, including Officer Brennan. The legal argument was instantly rendered moot. The judge seized the moment. "Gentlemen, you have just witnessed why this bond must be protected, not severed. This is not a pet. This is a partnership. This is a therapeutic bond that saved human lives today." Later, after the agreement was hammered out, Phoenix would be registered as a conservation support companion under strict conditions. Buzz sat alone with his friend. He looked at Phoenix and finally broke. He spoke about his army service, the faces of those he couldn't save, the grief of losing his wife, and the terrible emotional isolation that had followed. I tried to save everything out there. My brothers, my wife, and I failed. But in the end, only Phoenix nudged his head gently into Buzz's lap. The wolf had already chosen. He was not a wild animal that feared man, nor a dog that depended on man. He was family. The prejudice that sought to categorize and remove him had been defeated by an act of absolute species-transcending loyalty. The abandoned red wolf, who was never a puppy, had grown into a magnificent symbol of hope. He taught an old soldier that true strength lies not in fighting, but in trusting, that loyalty knows no species, and that the most profound healing often comes from the most unexpected places. They were living proof that sometimes, to save yourself, you just need to save something else. If this incredible story of second chances and unbreakable loyalty touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting stories of hope and courage. What unlikely bond has helped you through a difficult time? Tell us in the comments below.